Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 281st episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast, and welcome to June. This month's theme for the podcast is about loneliness in honour of Loneliness Awareness Week, which runs from the 9th to the 15th of June. Incidentally, it's also Men's Health Week. Don't forget the podcast is now fortnightly. If you're missing weekly content, you have 5 years worth of work to reflect back on. And if you'd like my handy guide that lists the episodes with a clickable link, you can get it at bit.ly/DMPG23. Meeting loneliness together is this year's theme for Loneliness Awareness Week, and it's all about reducing the stigma around this natural human emotion. The MP, Jo Cox, recognised that loneliness can affect anyone, from the elderly to new mums, or to refugees to the recently bereaved. The scale of the issue of loneliness is huge, and a landmark report was commissioned by the British Red Cross and the Co-op in 2016, finding that over 9 million people are affected by loneliness in the UK. And now, as always, let's start with definitions. And according to the Loneliness Week website, loneliness is a perceived mismatch between the quality or quantity of social connections that a person has and that of which they would like to have. You don't, of course, have to be on your own to feel lonely. You might feel lonely in a relationship with friends or family, or on social media, in a city, at university. You can feel lonely if you feel as if you're not being acknowledged or understood by those around you. And of course, you can feel lonely within the relationships you have in life if they're lacking in emotional depth. You might have grown apart from someone, or if communication has broken down. You, of course, can feel lonely when you're by yourself. Other people might choose to be alone and live happily without much social contact, and that is different. But loneliness can also be characterized by its intensity or how strongly it is felt, which can change from moment to moment and over different durations over time. Now, interestingly, there are actually different types of loneliness, and there are 3 that are most commonly identified in evidence and literature on loneliness. So the first one is emotional loneliness. So this is the absence of meaningful relationships. Social loneliness, a perceived deficit in the quality of social connections. Existential loneliness, a feeling of fundamental separateness from others and the wider world. And we also have transient loneliness, a feeling that can come and go. Situational loneliness that can occur at certain times, like Sunday afternoons or Monday mornings, or potentially national holidays. And then chronic loneliness, feeling lonely all or most of the time. And as with everything, there'll be certain factors that can increase our risk of loneliness. And these will include things like age, ethnicity, disability, certain living circumstances. So it's been shown that people who are rented accommodation are often at higher risk of being lonely. It could be people that have caring responsibilities that's quite lonely, people going through significant life changes, living in certain areas, and the list goes on. And I've actually included in the show notes the link to the campaign against loneliness, which has lots of information and reports. Now, of course, we can all feel lonely sometimes, but it's that prolonged and intense experience of loneliness which then starts to have negative impacts on our life and our mental well-being. And there's lots and lots of stats. So loneliness can actually increase the risk of early mortality by 26%. Unsurprisingly, loneliness means that people are at greater risk of poorer mental health, including depression. There is an association between mental well-being and loneliness. So research estimates that 60% of people experiencing chronic loneliness experiencing mental distress, compared to 15% of people who are not chronically lonely. So significant difference there. 62% of lonely young people say that feeling lonely makes them lose confidence in themselves. Loneliness is also associated with elevated blood pressure and acute stress, and the Jo Cox report found that it's equivalent physically of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And also loneliness can result in poorer sleep quality in young adults and sleep inadequacy and dissatisfaction in the general population. Now let's think about then loneliness at work. And there's another Red Cross report that looked at exploring the extent of loneliness at work since the COVID-19 pandemic. And what they found was that more than 1 in 10 workers often or always experience aspects of loneliness at work. while nearly half of workers feel lonely at some of the time. Disabled workers and those with long-term health condition affecting their day-to-day lives are more likely to report general loneliness than those without, so 24% compared with 9%. Workers from global majority groups are more likely to feel that they often or always have no one to talk to at work, so 13% compared with 9% for white workers. And they also said, global majority workers, that they also feel that their colleagues are like strangers to them. 37% of workers from global majority groups compared with 27% of white workers. Interestingly, senior managers report higher levels of general loneliness. 32% of senior managers are often or always lonely, which is nearly twice the average. And they're also more likely to feel that their colleagues are like strangers. And contact with colleagues is not enough to prevent loneliness. And home workers are not lonelier than those working on site, interestingly, according to this report. However, 84% of on site workers agree they feel closer to their colleagues compared to only 44% of home workers. And of course, changes in working location during COVID-19 restrictions has actually led to some improved relationships for many. Now, if you go back to aloneness or being alone, that refers to the physical state of being by oneself, while loneliness is an emotional experience of isolation, even when you may be surrounded by others. Often choosing to be alone can be a choice, a preferred state of solitude, while loneliness is an involuntary feeling of disconnection. So in terms of the summary, aloneness is a physical state of being alone, can be a choice or consequence of circumstances, can be a source of strength and creativity, doesn't necessarily imply negative emotions. Loneliness is an emotional state of feeling isolated and disconnected, can occur even when surrounded by others because it's an internal feeling, can lead to negative feelings like sadness and emptiness, and of course, as we heard, can have both psychological and physical health impacts. So why do we then need to care about loneliness at work? Well, I think I feel like I've made the case, but of course, loneliness at work impacts both individual and organizational well-being. So it is a critical issue to address. And as with everything, as with most things we talk about in the podcast, loneliness is likely to lead to lower productivity, decreased job satisfaction, health problems for employees, and of course, as always, can negatively affect companies' financial performance and overall culture. So there's a lot there. So we've got reduced productivity. We can also think about increased absenteeism and turnover. That then leads to higher financial costs for recruitment. And all of this is a kind of loop, and it feeds into itself. And remember that when people feel lonely and isolated, it can really limit the networking opportunities, reduce their visibility, and make it really much harder to advance in their career. So I really hope you're enjoying the content of this podcast and want to keep up to date. If you are, then join my newsletter. When you join my mailing list, you'll receive my white paper on inclusive language and mental health. And that link is bit.ly/ILMHCK. Right. So what are the leading causes of loneliness at work? What do we think might be prompting it? Well, we touched on it before in terms of COVID-19 and people working at home. Now, for many people, this was brilliant and they really enjoyed it. So that difference between working alone and having more autonomy and agency versus the feeling of loneliness. But flexible working arrangements are brilliant and they offer lots and lots of benefits. For some people, over a substantial period of time, it can lead to lack of social interaction. And indeed, we also saw people moving areas, which may mean they didn't have the social connection they were used to in the area where they were living. So this can also make it harder, of course, for employees to build relationships with colleagues. And again, remember the Red Cross report, it's saying just because you have colleagues doesn't mean you're not going to feel lonely. But we also know that if we feel part of a workplace community, the chances of feeling loneliness are likely to be reduced. The other thing is a poor workplace culture, or a workplace that doesn't encourage positive communication, collaboration, inclusion, and ensure psychological safety. High workloads, this is a huge issue. So, of course, employees and staff members who are overwhelmed with the things they have to do, changing goalposts, shifting sands, changing deadlines, not being able to engage with colleagues, discuss it, can lead to significant feelings of detachment. What the things that are going on now really in terms of organizational changes, redundancies, people being moved around, not being given enough notice, that's really difficult and that's likely to contribute to a feeling of loneliness, ambiguity, uncertainty, and all of that's not helpful. And then of course, unclear communication. So poor communication from management or from your line manager, even from colleagues, can leave employees feeling really unsure, out of the loop, and reinforce that sense of disconnection. And recently a client we'd agreed a project and they just kept sending me emails about a report. And I said, I really don't understand what you'd like me to do with this. Thank you for sending this to me. I don't know what you want me to do with this. Are you happy to go ahead, or do you need me to do something differently? And they said, oh, no, no, that's fine. We're just sending this for information. Now, that's not loneliness directly, but I can imagine if you have that all the time, it can leave you feeling very confused and thinking, I'm just going to detach and isolate myself. And because we don't want to get into it, and we don't want to get into the micromanagement. So often we can feel lonely because we're trying to protect ourselves as well. So what can workplaces do then to address some of these areas? Now, it's important to say there isn't a one size fits all solution. It's not, we'll do this and people will stop feeling lonely. And of course, some people might come to work to have that sense of connection and feel lonely in their personal life. So, it's a big subject, and it has many areas to it. But I think one of the things is to promote, or to start to look at your workplace culture and in terms of its communication. So it's really important that we all have a role when it comes to setting the tone, particularly managers and leaders. So to look at that and encourage collaboration, contributions, how we want to communicate, what are the check-ins you're doing in your team meetings, looking at ways in which people can get to know each other a little bit with respecting boundaries and privacy. I think that's very, really important. The second thing is about social interactions. Now, this is an interesting one because some people can't stand it. They're happy enough at work. They don't really want to socialize with their colleagues. They don't want to go out for after work drinks. They don't want to have enforced lunches. So I think going back to the first point around a positive workplace culture, it's also looking at the preferences of your team. And of course, sometimes people will have to make an effort and come to a team day and have a team lunch. But it's that balance for your team, or it's that balance for your organization. I don't think people should be forced to do things. I think that's really, really important. But there could be opportunities like cross-departmental projects, drop-in coffees, maybe some kind of lots of workplaces have book groups. So there are different options for people for connectivity. Ideally, social interactions are a really great way of building trust, but we don't want to force people to do things. So I think that's a balance. Also knowing that this isn't a catch-all to fix loneliness, but it can help people feel part of a workplace community. That's how I would phrase it. The third thing is around flexible working, and really, people love flexible working. I think it's really important, but how do we do it without isolating people? So remote and hybrid work arrangements, they are much more common now, but some people don't see their colleagues very much. So how do you do those check-ins? So do people want to check in on the phone? Do they want to do video calls? Are there sort of social events that you want to run virtually? And again, you need to think about that. Planning when employees will come into the office for face-to-face interactions, and also being really mindful that we're not eliminating or excluding people intentionally or unintentionally when we're having meetings and doing things like that. Then, of course, if someone's mental health is impacted, remember that you should be promoting any support programs that you have, employee assistance programs, any staff counselling, also signposting to regulated and well-known third sector sources, making sure that people go and see their GP and have those discussions. This can be really useful, and also saying it sooner rather than later because we don't want it to exacerbate and get worse. Buddy programs are also quite good. So these can be official programs where people are assigned a buddy, often done when someone joins an organization. But I found that very useful when I've been working remotely and have been given a buddy, and that's really useful. And having the parameters around that, and you have to build some trust. So it has to be, these buddy conversations, what they are, and they're not line management, but they're just to help people ask questions about, wait a second, how does this work in an organization? And that's really, really useful. Finally, as well, one of the things that workplaces can not be so good at is around not recognizing and appreciating employees. Because if we don't recognize people, it's a bit like being in the family zone where you think, well, I'm just doing all of this and it's really thankless. So we need to, I think it's really good to show appreciation. And again, you need to think about someone's preference and how they want to do this. I think some people being called up to the front of a huge team meeting is mortifying for them. It's the last thing they want. But maybe, one-to-one saying, that was a really brilliant piece of work. Well done. How did you feel about that? And also encouraging peer-to-peer recognition, because that's going to really strengthen connection between colleagues. So I hope that gives you a good summary. And I think when I started looking into this topic, really, it's vast, actually. Loneliness is real, and there is a difference from choosing to be alone and the sensation of loneliness, which most of us have probably felt at some point in our lives. When we feel part of a positive workplace community, our well-being increases, I think loneliness at work is quite a forgotten, unknown, unthought about area, but it's vital to ensure employees' well-being. And there is actually a lot that can be done. And I think the first thing is recognizing this. So creating a positive environment is not only beneficial for individual employees, but also boosts morale, engagement, and retention across an organization. So if you're looking to foster a positive well-being culture and would like guidance on creating strategies tailored to your team's needs, Diverse Minds is here to support you. Do reach out to me via email, Layla, Leyla, at diverseminds.co.uk to find out how I could help you. I really hope you've enjoyed today's show and, of course, the shows over the last 5 years. If so, please write me a review on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast from. And don't forget my TEDx talk about the connection between culture, race and mental health at work. That link is bit.ly/TEDx Wolves, WOLVESLO. And if you enjoy it, please leave a positive comment on YouTube, share and like. And the resources for this episode is the Joe Cox Report on Loneliness, the website Campaign to End Loneliness, the Red Cross Loneliness at Work Report, the Loneliness Awareness Week website, and People Insight Loneliness at Work. So we're catching up with you again in 2 weeks' time to talk more about loneliness and what we can do. Until then, everyone, take care and bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.